Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Garmer, and I served as a judge for this year's Aspen Words Literary Prize. And today I'm interviewing one of the finalists for the prize, Nicole Dennis-Benn, who wrote a beautiful book called Patsy, which you can see right over my shoulder there. I'm thrilled to have the chance to speak with you today, Nicole.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here to speak with you as well.
So Patsy is just your second book,
Yes.
and it's an amazing and beautiful book. And I'm curious, of all the topics you could be addressing, why did you write Patsy? Why did you introduce us to this particular woman? And why is she right for this moment in time?
Yeah, I really wanted to write a character like Patsy, who is the kind of immigrant that we don't really see very often. We always talk about the concept of the good immigrant, the person who is here perhaps for school or perhaps to do the jobs, like getting to certain positions with the right education. With Patsy, she's coming to America undocumented, on only one dream, and that is actually to rekindle a relationship that she had back home with a friend that's living in Brooklyn, but also to find her way, to find her place in the world. And I really wanted to capture a narrator like that, who is a working class Jamaican immigrant, who had never been given much choice to begin with back home in Jamaica. In addition to that, she's also running away from the role of motherhood, another thing that she was never given a choice before she became a mother. In Jamaica, abortion is illegal. So when Patsy got pregnant with True, her 5-year-old daughter, who she left behind to come to America, it was more for her a kind of a way to self-preserve, to actually to walk away from a situation that she feels that she probably wouldn't be good at. She never had validation in life. She never had her own self-worth affirmed. And for her, this was her saying to herself, I'm going to go to a place where I can actually be me, and also try her best to seek that happiness that she felt she wouldn't have found in Jamaica, her homeland. And so really I wanted to follow a character like that, because I've never seen her on the page before. I've never seen a mother who dared to give up her child just like that. I've never seen that undocumented immigrant who's not that educational person, person who has a college degree, who's coming here to be a doctor, lawyer, much like myself, for example. I wanted to see that immigrant who's doing the jobs that nobody else wants to do, that immigrant who's living in a house full of other people, because there's no way for her to get by undocumented. And it's interesting now that we're talking about this in the middle of coronavirus, because Elmhurst, Queens, that has a lot of those immigrants is the most affected right now in New York City, because those immigrants are living on top of each other. So the virus is affecting them disproportionately. And so I actually thought about Patsy in those moments, like, oh my gosh, yes, she's a fictional character, but the people who she's based off are human beings, are real. People like my father, who came here like Patsy as undocumented and having to have those living situations, no health insurance, nothing, and just living off fear, and also being driven by the dream to take care of their families back home. So really, that's really where that will to write Patsy came from initially.
It's such a multi-layered and complex story that you've presented. I mean, as you point out, it's an immigrant story, and it reminds us that people come here in many different ways. I mean, Patsy arrives with a visa, but becomes undocumented right after she overstays her visa.
Yes.
And as you point out, there's a lot of very real and in many ways raw content that follows Patsy as she navigates her world there. But I think for me, one of the most challenging parts of this book was Patsy's approach to giving up her daughter and giving up motherhood in order to move to a place where she could seek to be her authentic self.
Yes.
And I have to say, this book stayed with me for so long, because as a mother myself, that pulls at you, right? I'm a woman and I'm a mother, and I cheer for Patsy, but I yearn for a world where these decisions and these choices aren't as painful as they appear to be. But Patsy makes this happen. What do you think that we can learn from the sacrifices that Patsy makes, especially with, with regard to her daughter. What do you think Patsy learns? Because it's clear by the end of the book that she is learning and still growing.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because when I was writing this book, it occurred to me that I'm actually writing a coming of age story. Usually the traditional coming of age stories begin when the person is like, a toddler or infant or a child or teenager coming of age. But I felt like this story is really at the coming of age of a woman who comes into herself. There's that question of home. Where is home? Where can I find the most acceptance? And so in Patsy's mind, home, she fled a home that never really claimed her as a dark-skinned working class Jamaican, right? Who she never got those opportunities to thrive, to actually remain there on the island itself. And then, of course, coming to another home, migrating to the United States of America, to New York City, to Brooklyn, and finding out that home is not here either, in the sense of, if she doesn't have the right paperwork, there's nothing she can really do. So she's really just existing, just, nameless, faceless, undocumented. And so through the progression of the novel itself, realizing that home is actually within herself. And really what I actually ended up learning from a Patsy was kind of like honing your own inner strength, because while I was writing Patsy, I also had criticized her for a time. I was writing, and yes, I was judging my own character, but it was after putting aside that judgment and realizing that here's a woman that's actually doing the best that she actually can. Patsy doesn't have a therapist that she can sit across from and say, well, this is what I'm going through. I don't think motherhood is for me. And also seeing her own mother abandon her. Her mother, Mama G, was actually physically in the house, but emotionally she was not there. She gave her life to the church. And so Patsy seeing her mother would rather worship these Jesus figurines as opposed to put food in the cupboard. She's seeing all that and thinking to herself, I don't want to be my mother. And so in an act of desperation, when she became a mother, she handed off True to True's father, thinking he's the better parent. He could actually give her more than what she could offer her daughter. And I think, to me, that's that kind of sacrifice. I know immediately on first read, perhaps people might be like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? But ultimately in Patsy's mind, in her, because of her desperation, that was her way of giving her child more. She gave her child a community. She gave her child something that she thought she could never have given her. And in addition to that, she sought her own freedom, something that we don't really see women in society given that visa, or in the literal sense to do. We were, as toddlers, as babies, we were given dolls, right? We were told that we have to be maternal. We have to step into that role as a mother, whether or not we want it, right? And so here's a woman that's saying to herself that I never wanted it. And, admitting that, not out loud initially, but to herself first. And daring to say, what, let me see what else is out there. She was a very young mother. She had True like in her early 20s. And I think about myself too in those early days, in those early 20s, in graduate school, getting my nose pierced, all these things, exploring the world, exploring myself, my sexuality. Patsy wants that. She desires that. And that was really what she ended up wanting to do when she migrated to the United States, hoping to get that. Of course, we realized that she has a lot of challenges, but at the same time, she really held true to wanting to find herself.
Mm-hmm. And this story really is rooted in two places. You bring us to Jamaica, and yes, you have us in New York, Patsy's New York, yes, perhaps some of the New York that you've seen and what you just referenced with the New York we're seeing with the COVID pandemic. Yes. And I think it's really important that we see this story rooted in both worlds, because we really do get to understand the full picture of Patsy's transformation or Patsy's growth and discovery as a woman. One of the things I found so wonderful about the book overall and having this rooting in Jamaica is how much of the dialogue is in the patois. And it's so beautiful. I had to read passages out loud just to hear it. But I wonder, we understand that you are going to read a passage for us as well. I don't know if you've selected something with dialogue, but if you'd like to share that with us now, that would be great.
Yes, definitely. So for the 1 minute read, it doesn't really have dialogue, but it's something that's short and sweet, but kind of gets inside of Patsy's mentality while she's in Brooklyn, New York, when reality really crushes her at the moment. There are two types of devil's coal. One in which you cannot bring yourself to leave the room, much less the bed, to do the simplest things, and the other in which you go through the motions in a constant stupor. Patsy lies in bed, turned away from the dark, heavy thing that has returned, its shadow dimming the room. With a cover over her head, she closes her eyes, not wanting to see it. God knows how long she's gone without eating. She could die, she knows, though death doesn't seem that scary after all. Not as scary as the dark thing. Here in America, there are no bush teas for it, no bitter mix of ramgoat roses, rosemary, lemongrass, bissy, and other herbs. No pastor to come with a bottle of sanctified olive oil. No neighbor from the country who can wring the neck of a goat and sever it with a machete for you to bathe in its blood. No time to lie down and let it run its course. She's powerless against it. The real hell is allowing this place to eat you alive, Fiona says to Patsy, when she notices that she has been lying in the same spot on the bed inside their studio from sunup to sundown. How many rotations has the sun gone through since Patsy climbed in the bed that night after seeing Cicely? She slips in and out of sleep. She wakes to Fiona shaking her. Patsy, Patsy, Patsy. It reminds Patsy of her daughter's voice, how it would pull Patsy from the lips of a deep sleep. Here she's in the midst of it, hating it, terrified of it, and yet her only thought is of true. During those years, it was the anticipation of going to America to see Cicely that had kept Patsy alive. But what is keeping her alive now? Where will she find the strength that would protect her from the spells? How can she live knowing that she lost Cicely to her American dream? It's then that what Fiona had said about not having the luxury of choosing love makes sense to Patsy. That's what it all comes down to, choice. When has she ever been given a choice? Never. She was never given the choice to say no the first time her legs were pried open. Never given a choice to rid her body of the grievance she had to carry for 9 months. Never given a choice to look at another woman and allow herself to be carried by the feeling without blood, bright red on glistening glass, sticking to her like shadow. Now, the promise of life comes with accepting the fact that she'll never have a choice. That's it. Thank you.
That's incredibly powerful. And it shows the striking difference between where she comes from, where she is, the choices that she's faced with, the traditions and the things that she knows that she looks to as, you know, we all look to fall back on in our times of need and struggle. But she's really heroic because she is doing this on her own without all of, as you read, all of those things that that mattered from home in this new place for her. And I'm, thinking about the cultural change that's involved for Patsy. In addition, an extra layer on top of how she becomes aware of her ability to make her own choices and her choices for loving and her choices toward her daughter True. And I'm wondering, as you look at this wonderful book you've put together and you think about the world that we are in, that women like Patsy, girls like True are in, what do you see as that relationship between the fiction that you've written, fiction in general, and the kind of political and cultural change and movement that we're all in, where we struggle to be able to make these choices, we struggle to be able to retain our culture in a new place and have it welcomed and embraced and be able to live it fully, to be ourselves fully. what do you see as that relationship between fiction and political and cultural change?
Yeah, I think very important to me. You know, I feel like fiction can be advocacy. I mean, without being didactic, of course. But you know, like I said, mentioned earlier in the interview, I really wanted to capture the stories, the untold stories. You know, especially first of all, womanhood. You know, how, for example, we never had choices to begin with. You know, usually, even now, politically speaking, our own bodies are not. We don't own our bodies. You know, it's all politics at this time. And the same thing that happened with Patsy, for example. You know, she didn't own her body. There was no ownership. And for her to actually say to herself, like, I need to actually take my power back. You know, and yes, do the unthinkable, which is walk away from motherhood. Yes, but at the same time, had she been given choices, it probably would have looked differently. Like, I asked myself first and foremost, what am I writing against? That's mostly what I ask myself, especially when I put pen to paper. I mean, of course, the story unfolds and unravels by itself, but in the back of my mind, usually, I'd actually want to say to myself, you know what? Bringing up these dark issues that we shy away from would actually incite conversations that need to be had. Because the more we sweep certain things under the carpet, the bigger the problem is, and there's no solutions. So the next generation comes of age and actually internalize a lot of the things that we never talked about. You know, so the things that I put in the book, for example, like the sexualization of our young girls, the choices that women and mothers don't really have to be human beings, right? To be put on certain pedestals and not be given the opportunities that boys and men get to make mistakes. You know, to me, it's very important to write these things down in a plot, in a storyline, to actually challenge my readers, challenge them to actually empathize with the characters for sure, and also to see the world outside of their boxes. You know, challenge them to step outside of how they perceive the world, to step inside of the shoes of a Patsy, you know, or any characters for that matter, right? To empathize with them, because I feel like empathy is really what's going to change the world. I mean, I may be optimistic, but I hope that when people can see others as mirrors of themselves as opposed to other, then that's when the change is going to come about. You know, we talk about COVID-19 right now, and I feel like right now people are still looking at those suffering as other, not in their own backyards, that they need help like anybody else. They need health insurance. They need to be quarantined properly, because not everybody can stay at home because they have no opportunities to be quarantined within their own homes if they're living on top of each other. So little things like that, like having the world, other people see or come inside of worlds that they're not used to, is important to me as a writer, which is why I continue to write.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have one last question before we go, because it looks like we're out of time. I'm wondering, we get to learn a lot. We get to learn quite a bit about True. Might there be another coming of age story that follows Patsy? Perhaps another book about
well,
water?
I'm so happy you asked that. Well, no, not a part 2 or anything like that. But I think True's story was definitely important to capture as well. You know, you usually hear about the parent coming, like going abroad, but not the child left behind. So I wanted True to have her story, or their story, like a gender non-conforming person, to finally speak and especially express their disappointments in being abandoned. And so, yeah, True was very important to me to capture in Jamaica itself.
Wow. Well, this is a great story, and I'd like to thank Nicole Dennis-Benn for joining me on this call. It's been a pleasure to speak with you about Patsy, and I wish you all good luck on Thursday.
Thank you so much.
For those of you listening, I hope you'll join us for the announcement of the Aspen Words Literary Prize winner on Thursday, April 16th at 6 p.m. Eastern. That's 4 p.m. Mountain Time. To tune in, visit aspenwords.org or follow along with the hashtag AspenLitPrize on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Thanks, everyone.